today's session is very simple, very basic, and this is a session which I first sat in when I was a kid, probably as young as you. And this session is about something that set me up for life, which made me open my mind, and I was like, wow, all right, this is how it works. And today's session is called How to Think Like a Scientist. It's a path through which you can discover a lot of many things. If you think about anything that's around us, think about planets. Someone about 400 years back, 500 years back, discovered each of the planets. And think about Venus, think about Mars. They've always been there, but we did not know they existed. So what did we do? We developed a lot of tools because, we cannot see with our naked eyes. Can we see Saturn with our naked eyes? Has anyone seen Saturn with their naked eyes? You don't really know, right? Because, everything seems the same, whether it's a star or a planet. Up in the sky, everything seems the same. So what do we use? If you want to see a planet or a star, what device do we use? Telescope, that's correct. Satya got it right. Yes, I think more kids in the class are getting it right now. It's called telescope. So what does telescope do? Telescope magnifies things. If there's something which is really tiny and very far away, what you do is you use the telescope, and that telescope magnifies it. The small object appears larger to our eyes, and then we're able to see very clearly how it looks. Without the telescope, we would never know that the Saturn has rings. How many of you know that Saturn has rings? And are there any other planets apart from Saturn that has rings? Like Uranus, you spelled it wrong, Peher. Uranus has. Yes, get the spelling right, please. I know you want to type fast. Mars is wrong. Mars doesn't have rings. Neptune, yes, Neptune has rings. Jupiter has rings. That's correct. So the planets which are in the outer limits of our solar system, they all have rings. How many of you knew it? Mercury, no, Mercury is not the right answer. Mercury doesn't have rings. Neptune, yes. Neptune has rings. All right. So the point that I'm trying to say here is there was once a time, think long back, 400 years back. Today we are in 2021, but if you were born in 1600 or 1621 to 400 years ago, we wouldn't know that Saturn existed. We didn't know that. We wouldn't know that, there is a planet called Neptune. We just didn't know that. So what did we do? A lot of curious people made a lot of different things. And remember, it's not one man who's done it all. There is no one man on this planet who's ever lived, who's discovered everything. No, that's not how it works. Science works because of teamwork. A lot of different people do small discoveries, and then the people who come after them keep building on those discoveries. For example, someone built a telescope. He didn't know what to do with the telescope. He just knew that a telescope can be used to see objects which are very far away. And then someone came up with this idea. Okay, telescope is a very nice device. Why don't I use this to look at planets and stars? And then he started looking at the planets, and then we discovered other objects. So do you think it is possible for any one person, or was it possible ever for any one person to discover everything? No, right? Give me a thumbs up if anyone thinks one person can discover everything. Right? No one's giving me a thumbs up, which means you all agree that one person cannot do it all. There is a lot of teamwork that's involved. All right. So, and how does this work? It doesn't work people don't sit in a class and they decide, okay, today we're gonna discover Jupiter. That's not how it works. Most of the discoveries happen by accident. All right. It's true. Most of the discoveries happen by accident. No one knew that there was a planet called Jupiter, and no one was looking at it. Someone was just looking at what planets are there, just looking at each and every object in the sky, and they just stumbled upon Jupiter. It's as simple as that. It's accidental. If you think about many of the great discoveries, does anyone know the story of how gravity was discovered? Anyone? Okay. So, come on, tell me who discovered gravity? Come on, let's see who gets it first. Who discovered the idea of gravity? Yes. No, it's not Einstein. It's most of you are giving me the right answer. It is Sir Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton was again a scientist and he discovered gravity. Okay, so let me ask you a simple question. Before we discovered gravity, do you think gravity did not exist? Come on. This is an easy one. It did. No. Okay, someone says no. No, that's not true. All right, think about it. We did not know that Jupiter existed. But does it mean Jupiter did not exist? It did, right? Yes. Even before we knew it, Jupiter existed. Jupiter was always there. We did not know it was there. And we kept looking for many things, and then we found a planet and we named it Jupiter. Similarly, with all discoveries, things exist. So there is a difference between an invention and a discovery. Can someone tell me what is the difference between one, a discovery, and second, an invention? What's the difference? A very important concept to grasp. Discovery means finding things which are already there. For example, Jupiter. Jupiter was already there. We did not create Jupiter, right? We just found out, oh, Jupiter, there you are. All right, now we know you exist. Hi, Jupiter. Okay, so we just found Jupiter. It was already there. Same with gravity. Gravity was always there. We did not know gravity existed. And then Sir Isaac Newton was sitting, as you know, the story goes, Isaac Newton was sitting below an apple tree, and then an apple falls down. And then he starts wondering, why did the apple fall down? Why didn't it go up? Why? He did not have an answer. And then he thought, okay, I must investigate to find out what the answer is. And then he started wondering, what about all the other things? Watermelons fall down, coconuts fall down, everything falls down. If I throw a pen up, it falls down, right? Let me try just throwing this in front of you. I have a marker in my hand, in my left hand, just throwing it down. I didn't throw it down, I just left it and it comes down. And that's because of gravity. Gravity was always there. We did not know it existed. And then one curious mind, which was Sir Isaac Newton, one curious mind thought, okay, I should investigate. And then he investigated, and then he found out, okay, there is a force that exists which is attracting everything towards it. So Earth attracts everything towards it. It does not let things fly away from Earth. Right? Everything is falling towards the ground. And that force was called gravity. Similarly, Jupiter, we did not know existed, but it was there. So we just discovered it. Now the second concept that you need to understand is invention. For example, a telescope. Was telescope already there? Did someone, stumble upon it and they were like, oh, all right, here it is, telescope. Hi, telescope. No, that's correct. Telescope did not exist. We made it. We created it. We created it using a lot of different concepts of physics that we understood well. We understood that when you have two different types of lenses, then you can magnify things. How many of you wear spectacles? Hands up. I wear spectacles as well. I love my spectacles. So how many of you wear spectacles? Okay, I've got a bunch of kids. 1, 2, 3. I see only 3 hands. I'm only 3 and then I'm the 4th. All right, one more hand up. 5. So 5 people who wear spectacles in this class. And so we wear spectacles because, our eyesight is not perfect. Unlike the rest of the kids in the class, our eyesight is not perfect. So what do we do? To correct the imperfections in our eyesight, we use lenses. And those lenses help us in seeing things perfectly, just like all the others in the class do. And a telescope works on a very simple principle. You have lenses of different magnitude, of different power. And using those lenses, you can see objects that are very far away, very, very far away, and you can see them very clearly. Like if you wanted to see the rings on any planet, for example, Saturn, which are very beautiful, by the way, and I would recommend that if you ever get the chance to go to a planetarium, if you have a telescope in your school, go to your school at night, ask your physics teacher or your science teacher to organize an event where an astronomy event where you can watch the rings on Saturn. Yes, so alums on Saturn. That's brilliant. Isn't it beautiful? I saw it when I was in class 7. Yeah, I saw it with the telescope as well. And in fact, I made the telescope with some of my friends. So we had a small science club in our school, and I was the leader of that club. And then we made a telescope. And before I saw Saturn with my own eyes using telescope, I had only seen it in books and on paper, and it looked very nice. But when you actually watch it, it is so much more better. Watching it for real is so much more better than just watching pictures or watching it on video. All right, trust me, you will want to do that. Okay, so coming back, the rings on the Saturn were always there. We just discovered it, but the telescope wasn't there. We created telescope. We created telescope using different principles and ideas that we knew. We knew, for example, the same principle that we use for lenses on my spectacles is something that we use for making a telescope. We use different lenses so that we can see objects which are very far away and we can see them clearly. All right. So that's an important distinction between discovery and telescope. So my first question, so you have to tell me whether it's a discovery or an invention. Okay. So first, let's start with discoveries. Is this marker, is this a discovery? Hands up if you think it's the discovery. Okay, 6 hands are up, 5 hands are up. Was this discovered? 3 hands are up. Okay, Drushin thinks this was discovered. No, Drushin, this was not discovered. This was created. This did not exist. So this is made by Luxor, and the company Luxor created this marker. All right. So my question is, was this discovered? Hands up if you think it was discovered. Okay, now all the hands are down, except for Hari Kirtana. Okay, so no, this marker was not discovered, it was created. All right, I hope so. All the hands are down. So I hope everyone understands it clearly that this was created, this was invented and not discovered. All right, then let me ask you one more thing. So everyone understands oxygen, right? We breathe oxygen. So was oxygen discovered? Hands up if you think oxygen was discovered. Okay, I think oxygen was discovered. Only 10 people in the class think oxygen. Okay, it's 12. The number is going up. Come on, quick. Was oxygen discovered? If you think oxygen was discovered, then hands up. 15, 16. Okay. Almost half the class thinks that. 17. That oxygen was discovered. Go to your chat box, then you will see the option of hands up. 20. Okay. Good. Bunch of smart kids. So, okay, hands down everyone. Oxygen was discovered. No, it was not created. Oxygen already existed in the environment, and then we just discovered that, all right, there is a thing in the environment that we breathe, or else we would not live. Sorry, Alam saying that it was you know, there are a bunch of kids in the class who think oxygen was invented. No, let me make it clear to you. Oxygen was not invented. We did not create oxygen. Oxygen was already there in the environment. We just discovered that oxygen existed. Okay, and even today, when we are breathing oxygen, do you think we are creating oxygen? No, we're not creating oxygen. All we're doing is we are purifying the air and we are extracting oxygen from it. All right. So this is something that you all need to understand. You know, we have all these machines that give us oxygen, right? During the COVID crisis, a lot of people who were sick with COVID needed oxygen to breathe. Is that correct? Do all of you know that? Yes. Okay, a lot of you know that. So one of the problems with the COVID disease was that, you know, if you get infected with COVID, in some of the cases, people found it really difficult to breathe. They were not able to breathe. And what happens when we breathe? It's very simple. There is air that we breathe. Air has many different things. So can someone tell me what is the amount of nitrogen in air? What is the percentage of nitrogen in air? Approximately. Some of you would have studied this in school. Anyone? 78%. Okay, that's close. Yes, it's about 78%. So it's mostly nitrogen. Then we've got oxygen. How much is oxygen? Yes, a big part, let's say about 20-21% is oxygen. Okay. All right, everyone agrees around 20%, 20 or 21% is oxygen. So mostly it's nitrogen. A small chunk is oxygen, and then we've got other gases like carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, etc., etc. A lot of other gases which are present in small quantities. But which is the gas that our body needs out of all these gases? Do we need nitrogen? Do we need oxygen? Or do we need something else? What do we need? Oxygen. That's correct. Everyone knows that. We're breathing. Even now when we breathe, we're breathing in the complete air. All right. We're not just breathing oxygen. We're breathing everything. Nitrogen also goes inside. Carbon dioxide goes inside. All the nitrous oxides go inside. They go inside, but our lungs, they absorb oxygen and they release everything else. So when we exhale, everything comes out. Only the oxygen stays inside. All right. So that is how the process of breathing works. And the only relevant thing, the only important thing for us is oxygen. So when we breathe, oxygen goes inside. We need that oxygen. Everything else is released out. Okay. Now, some people who were infected with COVID found it very difficult to breathe because there are these other gases which are going inside the body. So what do? We take air, we purify it, and we extract oxygen from it. All right. And then we extract oxygen to such a level that most of it is oxygen and we have very little of the other gases. For example, when you're breathing right now, you're taking in about 21% oxygen, right? So for the patients, what we did was purified air, we made it almost 90% oxygen. And then when someone's breathing it in, oxygen, all the gases go inside, but mostly it's oxygen, so it's easier to breathe. Okay. Now, so oxygen was discovered or invented? Come on, hands up if you think it was discovered. Let's see how many of you get it right now. Okay, 12. I see only 12 hands up. 13. My hand is also up, by the way. 14, 15. I'm counting. Okay. 17. All right, almost half the class thinks that oxygen was discovered, which is good. So oxygen was discovered and not invented. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is share my slides with you. And we will go through, understanding of how the scientific process works, how to think like a scientist. Let me just share my screen. All right. So everyone be ready to think like a scientist and actually learn how to think like a scientist, because what's the first step to becoming a scientist is to think like a scientist. Is everyone ready? So what do you need to think like a scientist? You don't need much. You need a pen, a paper, and then the most important thing is an open mind. All right. So everyone grab a pen and paper and open your mind. Open your mind to understanding things that you do not understand. Open your mind to believing things that you're not sure of, that you do not think even exist. Okay. So a scientific process or the scientific thinking model is very simple. At the core, it's a very simple model. What do you do first? You observe. Let's take a very simple example. We wake up in the morning and then we see sunlight. And if I were to wake up every morning and see each morning when I wake up, there is sunlight. And I'm just observing it. Every morning it's well lit up because of the sun. And it's just a very simple observation that all of you would have done, right? So each morning when you wake up, is it dark or is it bright? All right, let's see what answers do I have in the chat. It's bright, yes. So everyone's observed this. When you wake up in the morning, it's bright. Good. That is step one, you observe. Step two is the hypothesis. All right, and let's say so what is a hypothesis? A hypothesis is a statement of what you think is the reason, or what you think is the scientific reason of what is happening, an explanation of what is happening, that is called the hypothesis. It's just a very simple explanation of what is happening. So let's say I wake up every morning, I see the sun, and then I see that it's bright. So I see sun, I see bright, I see two things I've observed. So now I form a hypothesis that sun is giving me the light. This is a simple hypothesis. It's an explanation of what could be the reason of what is happening. Okay? Sun is a fireball. Yes, this can be the hypothesis that sun is a fireball. And what do you do then? You do an experiment. If you do an experiment to check whether your hypothesis is correct or wrong. Okay? Without an experiment, you cannot prove that your hypothesis is right or wrong. So you have to do experiments. You have to gather data by using the experiments, and then you analyze that data. And if the analysis tells you, if the conclusion of your analysis tells you that your hypothesis is correct, then yes, your theory is correct. Otherwise, if the hypothesis is wrong, then the theory is wrong. It's as simple as that. Now, when I explain it, it sounds a little difficult and tricky, but let's just take an example and then see how it works. All right, ready everyone for an example? Okay. All right. So this is what I just explained to you. So you do an observation first, and then you make a guess of what might be true or what might work. All right. And hypothesis could be right or wrong. We never know. So what do? We do an experiment. We test the hypothesis using experiments. We gather all the data, and then we analyze that data, and then depending on the data, we form the conclusion. Always remember, an hypothesis could be right or wrong. It's not necessarily right. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next one. So let me tell you a story now, because stories make it so much simpler to understand things. About 400 years back, a lot of people thought that the earth was flat. Now, hands down everyone, after I ask you the question, hands down, so that when I ask you a new question, I can see how many people have the hands up. I have a new question for you. And the question is, do you think the earth is flat, or do you think the earth is round? What do you think? The earth is not flat, right? But now here's the thing. About 400 years back, people believed that the earth was flat. And then what did we do? We conducted a series of experiments to check whether the earth is flat or not. And then when those experiments were proven wrong, then we realized, oh my God, this was wrong. The earth is not flat. It's something else. It's not flat. Then we did more experiments, and then we determined that the earth is round. Okay. And this is what happens. Your hypothesis, the original hypothesis was that the earth is flat, but that was wrong. Sometimes we believe a hypothesis to be true, but it may not always be the case. So it's very important for the scientific process that you do experiments, and then you form your conclusions based only on the experiments. All right, based on the data in the experiments. Okay, so this was a very simple example to teach you that hypothesis could sometimes be wrong. Okay, never believe the hypothesis until and unless you have the results from the experiment. Always go with the results of the experiment, and that is the most important thing. And this is where having an open mind comes into picture, because let's say you did not have an open mind. If your hypothesis was that the earth is flat and you were just not open to listening to other ideas, do you think anyone would believe with a closed mind that the earth is round? Yes? Right. No one would believe it. If you had a closed mind, then you wouldn't believe it. So it's very important for the scientific process that you have an open mind. Okay, now a short quiz for you. Let's just flip through this quickly. Dash is a tentative explanation to a scientific question that can be tested. It's a tentative explanation. It's not the true explanation. Okay, what's the answer? Anyone? Hypothesis, that's correct. Okay, let's move on. Next one. A dash is an answer to the proposed question. Okay, now wait, let me move on to the next one. A dash is done to test if a hypothesis is right or wrong. What do? Experiment, that's right. You do experiments. Okay, and dash scientist notices the details of their surroundings. What kind of scientist? If our friend Sir Isaac Newton, if he did not have an open mind, then my friends, do you think we would know about gravity today? No. So it's very important that you're observant and you have an open mind. All right. So here's how, a very simple example of how this thing would work in real life, right? So while walking in a park, Ellen observed that trees under direct sunlight grow taller and healthier than trees in shady areas, okay? So let's say our friend Ellen is walking down a garden and, there are huge trees in the garden, there are some open areas. And what Ellen observes is that some trees which are under direct sunlight grow taller and others which are under a large tree in a shady area, they are not growing tall, they're very short. Okay, so what if you wanted to test something like this? What would we do? First, we form a hypothesis, and the hypothesis would be, something as simple as plants under direct sunlight grow taller. Okay, that would be the hypothesis. Then what would I do? I would conduct experiments. A simple experiment in this case would be, so I would take two samples. Let's say I take a sample of 50 plants which are in direct sunlight and 50 plants which are under a tree. Okay, and then I take a scale and then I measure how tall are the plants which are in sunlight and how tall are the plants which are under shade. Let's say so I have total results of 100 plants now, 50 from under the shade, 50 from under the sunlight. And then I'll tell you the results of my experiment and then you tell me whether the hypothesis is correct or not. Is everyone ready? Did everyone understand what's happening here? So, okay, everyone's ready, I believe. So I'll just repeat for the benefit of everyone. So I was walking down a garden and then I noticed that some plants are growing taller, some plants are not growing tall. And what I also noticed is plants which are under direct sunlight are growing taller and plants which are under shade are not growing tall. So I form a hypothesis. My hypothesis is plants which are under direct sunlight grow taller. And to test this hypothesis, I do an experiment. And the experiment is I take a scale and I measure the height of 100 plants, 50 from under the direct sunlight and 50 from under the shade. And the result of my experiment is the average height of plants which are under sunlight is 30 centimeters. Okay, everyone write it down. 30 centimeters is the average height of plants which are under direct sunlight. And the average height of plants which are under shade is 15 centimeters. So is my hypothesis correct? How many of you think my hypothesis is correct? Give me a thumbs up if you think my hypothesis is correct. Yes, come on. Quick. Okay, most of you think the hypothesis is correct. Yes, this is what a very simple experiment would look like. It can be as simple as this. It doesn't have to be complicated. You don't need a huge telescope for an experiment. It can be something as simple as this. You just need a scale in this case, right? I just take a scale, I measure 50 plants under sunlight, then I go under the shade, measure 50 plants. I check what the result is. My plants under 50, the 50 plants under sunlight are taller on average. So yes, my hypothesis is correct. Okay, let's move on to the next one. After an experiment about the effects of pesticides So everyone understands what pesticides are? Just for the benefit of everyone. So pesticides are chemicals that we spray on crops because there are these small insects and pests which eat away our crops. So to avoid that, what do? We spray chemicals to kill those pests and insects. All right, so that we have enough food to eat. Because if we don't do that, then the insects and pests will eat all our food, and we will starve of hunger. We will not have enough food. Okay, so after an experiment about the effects of pesticides on frogs, Troy organized the results in tables and graphs to easily study them. Okay, so what do? What stage is this? This is my experimentation stage. When you analyze the data, it's always useful to keep a record of the data. Okay. Then next, Jam tested her hypothesis on the basic needs of plants using monk seeds, glass jars, paper towels in a well-lit area. Okay, this is another example of how you could do an experiment. So another example, Finn shared the results of his experiment about the effects of greenhouse gases with other climate scientists. Now, if you're doing, and this is another study, or this is another area of research that I have not covered much in this class. So each time scientists do experiments, they do not just keep the results to themselves. Do you think we should share the results of our experiments, or we should hide the results of our experiments? Correct, we should share the results of our experiments, and I'll tell you why that is important. Now look, at any one point in time, there are so many people on the planet. There are 7 billion people on the planet, and there are many scientists that we have. A lot of scientists are working on the same problems. For example, climate change. That is a problem many people are working on. A lot of different scientists are trying to figure out solutions on how we can tackle climate change. Sometimes different teams and different scientists are working on the same solution. So it's very important that you share the results of your solutions that can help other people also, because we are all fighting for the same cause. We are all on one team. We're all trying to solve global issues here, and so it's very important that we share the results of our experiments so that other people can benefit and take that research forward. Okay, sometimes we don't do it because of different reasons, because of commercial reasons that I will not get into today, but generally speaking, it's always a good idea to share the results of our experiments so that other people can benefit from it and take that research forward. Otherwise, if you discovered something, let's say, let me just give you an example. Let's say you were sitting in 1621 and you had a mighty big telescope with you and you were looking at the planets, and then you saw that Saturn had rings. And let's just say no one before you knew that Saturn had rings. If you do not tell this to the world, then no one would know that Saturn has rings. So it's very important that you let the world know. And then everyone will say, all right, my dear friend, you're the one who discovered the rings on Saturn. Okay? Okay, moving on. So here we're going to do another exercise. Read each situation carefully on your paper. Answer each item in 2 or 3 sentences. Okay, I asked you to get a pen and paper, so this is an exercise that all of you will now do. Okay, very simple example of what's happening here. Sari observed that silk woven by spiders is highly stretchable and flexible. All right, we get our normal silk from silkworms. Everyone knows that. We get the silk from silkworms. But our friend Sari here observed that the silk woven by spiders is highly stretchable and flexible. She then concluded right away that spider silk is a good substitute for commercial silk fabric. She plans to share her conclusion with a textile company. Now, so our friend observed that silk, which is woven by spiders, is highly flexible and stretchable. Okay, and then she plans to share the conclusions with a textile company. Textile companies are the ones who make saris, for example, silk saris. Is this enough, or does she have any proof that this is true? No, right? So what do we need to do to prove that this is true? Experiment and analyze. That is correct. Just an observation doesn't mean much. Okay, an observation is only an observation until and unless we get proof. Once you get proof, then yes, it is we have formal results. Okay, so in everything that we do, we need to follow the proper scientific process, which is very important. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Flint's experiment showed him that fish kills are a result of high water temperature. Okay, so let's say in a pond, because of global warming, the temperatures are growing up and higher temperatures are killing the fish. He made another hypothesis to investigate other causes of fish kills aside from what he first concluded. He also concluded other scientists on the result. He also consulted, other scientists on the results of his experiments. What characteristics of a good scientist is shown by Flynn? So he's consulting other scientists. That's number one. Number two, he's investigating, which means he's also thinking about what experiments to do so that he can gather data and then make a conclusion. Because just an observation is not enough to give you answers. He's open-minded. That's correct. Okay. All right. So we come to the end of our class today.